Okay. And now we are live. Welcome, welcome. Hi, I see your question. I see your question, Kelvin, and I will answer that momentarily. But right now, I want to welcome everyone who is here live with me, whether you're live with me on Instagram, whether you're live with me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, to the Black Mind Garden live podcast today. And this is where we are remapping minds so you can create a life of your design. And I'm super excited today because I have a guest that we have been trying to get this live going for probably about 2 months now. And it's okay because I do believe that everything always happens in divine timing. And so I am here to introduce Mandii Brown, who is the let me get it right. The Relatable Counselor.
There we
And she is
go.
the owner of the business, the company. Well, what had happened was, which I love the name of that. And we're talking today about the incarcerated mind. So without much further ado, welcome, Mandii, to the show today. I'm so excited to have you here. So, how are you?
I'm good. It's rainy, but I'm good nonetheless.
Good, 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 good. So, I want to start by asking you to really just kind of I like to have my audiences get to know my guests, like, who you are, what you do, and how did you come to be where you are today? So, just, go ahead and share a little bit about yourself for the audience.
Okay. Well, my name's Amanda, but I only go by Mandii. No one ever calls me the A word. I don't align with it. um, Originally, I am born and raised from Chicago. While I was there and doing undergrad and after undergrad, I taught and was the academic advisor for the public school system and the charter school system. And while teaching, I saw this lack between us and our students. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can connect with them through their parents because obviously that's like the next thing best to them. And after talking with a lot of parents, I saw there's just a mental gap in our community that a lot of people don't acknowledge. So I left the education system and went straight into social work and went back to school for clinical mental health counseling.
Mm,
And with that, I got to see like the ins and outs of the state level system. So as far
yeah.
as like welfare, Medicaid, housing, medical, like the humongous gap in that.
Mhm.
And that led me to dive into mental health more in depth because I wanted to figure out why not only we were in a way reliant on it, but how we put ourselves in these situations when some of us that grew up in the same environment had the same tools to better ourselves. So
Right.
I started going down the rabbit hole and realized that Black people, and in a way, we are already knocked off our square. It's never even. But mentally wise, that it was never meant for us to get mental help in any type of way whatsoever. And so
Mm,
then getting it, that stigma comes as, oh, you're crazy, you need medication, or crazy, don't come near them. They're different from us. Like we start shunning our own people who show like they have certain problems. We make jokes about it. And so then we
right.
start coping wrong. And
Mhm.
the more I learned about all that, I kind of bridged the gap in my own personal life and with my family. And then I took all that I've learned and just took it out there.
I love that. And you said something that was just really interesting, which is how the stigma, right? You talk about the
Mm-hmm.
stigma and how, the type of therapy that exists, the type of therapy that was created, that was not, when therapy was created, it wasn't created for us.
Yeah.
It was created inside of that system of white supremacism culture. It was created for different people. And so, we talk about a lot in my field, the medical mistrust, Black people and medical mistrust of the system. It's not really just Black people, it's people of color in general, because I know there's
Yeah.
medical mistrust by Latinos, there's medical mistrust in the Asian community, there's medical mistrust in all of the communities of color because of the way that system is set up. And so it's interesting when I started to really transition into equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and start to look into disparities in health equity and that sort of thing, to come to understand the disparities in mental health and why that is. Like that the same mistrust that there is in the medical system, there is also in this mental health field as well, and rightfully so, because this work wasn't, the types of diagnosis that would be put up on us, and how we're our culture, particularly, Black Americans are misdiagnosed all the time,
Yeah.
all the time, and overdiagnosed, more extreme diagnosis, right? And which puts us in the system faster, right? And so then, of course, when we see our friends or family going into certain systems, it makes us afraid to even talk about our own mental health. So you talk about what you do now,
Now,
because that leads us right into the conversation of the incarcerated mind.
well, in this moment, I work for the men's and women's prison down here as their cognitive behavior specialist and their counselor. So I pinpoint their trauma, help them work through it while they are incarcerated. And the crazy part about it is that we overdiagnose while they're in the system and make them more dependent on the stuff that they don't need to be dependent on, and it keeps them in that revolving door. So quite honestly, people who are locked up have it way worse than those who are free, and even then we're still not free. So
Yes. So you wrote an article
yes.
called The Incarcerated Mind. And I'd love for you to kind of share what inspired you to write that article. And what we'll do is I'll make sure I have you include a link to that, so that
Mhm.
when people go to the show notes, that they can read that article. I think it's important for that to get eyes on it. But what
Yeah.
inspired you to write that article? And if you just give a couple little highlights around that.
Um, what inspired it was probably my first group of ladies that I work with on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
and our first 2 weeks together, learning more about them, because naturally walking in there, our training, they
Mm-hmm.
put you in this mindset of they're an inmate, they're an animal. They'll manipulate you. Don't talk to them. Don't care for them. Just do your job. Keep your head down. Get in and out at your time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't go in. I didn't go in there like that. I actually came in and tried to create a safe space, because at the end of the day, for a human to open up to another human about what's genuinely wrong with them, they need to feel safe first. And you never feel safe in a jail environment. So
Right.
that was my thing, was to create that safe space first. And then
Mm-hmm.
when they got that, we built that rapport, and when they started opening up, I personally started doing my own research after that. I'm like, okay, a lot of these women came in, yes, dependent on drugs and or had that background, but they were never dependent on psych medication until they got here. And so
Mm-hmm.
I started wandering around and see, like, what were they getting prescribed, but what was their diagnosis, like how did you come to this conclusion? Because
Right.
in reality, when you use insurance, which you do in the system, you get Medicaid. Down here it's TennCare Select. You have
Mm-hmm.
to get somebody a diagnosis for the sessions to keep going and to
Mm-hmm.
give them stuff. And whether
No,
it's right or wrong, you still have to do it.
that's
So
interesting.
it could be a lot of people like, oh, I have bipolar manic episodes and anxiety and depression and schizophrenia, blah, blah, blah. And hear me with my DSM-5 book, and I'm like, you really don't. I'm like,
Right.
and I go like, where do you take it? And they don't even care what they take anymore. They just want it just to get high and to numb whatever they're feeling. So now I
Right.
have to work through that and meet them where they're at to purposely pinpoint what's wrong. So
Wait, so this is interesting. So what you're saying is that in order to get paid, they have to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so they're just given whatever diagnosis and then given medications in order to, in order to treat that said diagnosis. And then there's no there's no attempt to sort of look at what the underlying cause of this is, right?
No, when
And
people
so,
do mental health calls, they talk about what's wrong in that moment and they'll talk to them and send them back on their way. They never try
mm.
to go in depth.
And so it perpetuates the cycle, and yet it has them be um, dependent on a medication without actually looking at the trauma that because what you said, the mindset, they're animals. I mean, like even coming in
Mhm.
with that mindset. I just did a keynote in I was in Illinois, Springfield.
Yeah.
I was in Springfield, Illinois, this weekend at the Kennedy Brew Conference, and did a talk called "The Listening Drives Your Behavior." And it
Mhm.
was interesting because this is exactly what we talked about. Like how we listen to people is what's going to it's going to drive our reactions and responses. And so if you come into a system like being told, okay, they're inmates, they're animals, they're criminals, you're just there to, treat them, give them medications and send them on their way, then that listening will impact, the ability to really equitably give care. And what I love about you and what you did was that they said what they said, and you were like, "Nah, we're not gonna do that." And so you go in and you create the space for them to authentically do the work of healing their trauma. See, there's no rehabilitation inside of lockup when all you're doing is doling out medication. There's no rehabilitation that can happen,
Mhm.
right? So then you continue to be incarcerated, but your mind also continues to be, and you delve deeper into the incarcerated mindset, right? And what I feel like is fascinating to me is, in our conversation before, one of the things I remember you saying is that the incarcerated mind starts way before the person becomes incarcerated.
Yes.
And that just really, it made sense and it blew my mind at the same time. You know, so let's talk about that because I mean, there's so many directions we could go. I mean, this is really like a multiple episode conversation for real,
Yes.
real, real. And we could start with the school to prison pipeline. We could
It
talk.
starts at home. It starts
It
at home.
starts even before then.
It starts
All
at
right,
home.
talk to me. Talk about like this incarcerated mind. It's generational, in fact.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
So it is generational. It starts honestly with our great great grandparents. You want to talk about slavery, it honestly starts there and
Mhm,
how they were bred and
mhm,
how they were brought up, whether they chose to fight that stigma of them being three-fourths of a man or more than what was taught. It
mhm,
literally starts there and works their way down. And not only that, we're gonna bring it closer to home. It goes based off your grandparents. So
mhm,
I know for me, my parents, separate spectrums. My father's parents, we are Afro Latinas, so we're Black and Dominican.
mhm,
And my grandfather, as smooth as he is, he was an abuser and a narcissist.
mhm,
And my dad's mom, she had no connection to my dad and his brother, my uncle. And so she was a gypsy. She would travel and make money and would never be home. And so
mhm,
my mom's mom, her mother is this Catholic woman, long, wavy hair, long
mhm,
skirts, everything, and had this holier than thou mindset. Whereas
mhm,
my grandfather, rest his soul, he wanted to be that active parent in their home because there was a lot of them, but she never allowed that. She had that independent mindset. It's my way or the highway. So
mhm,
bring those two together, then have my parents and the BS they created, then it comes us. And so they picked up on the traits that they were running from their parents and brought it down to us, where it
mhm,
came as our mindset of how we are today. And I've learned that I had to unlearn a lot of things just to be okay. Because I'm thinking, well, it's okay for a man to do certain things, whatever, because I saw my parents and their parents do it.
Mm-hmm.
No, we have to unlearn that because it's not okay. I learned that it's okay to be an independent woman and to have all this stuff on our back. When in reality, no, we are killing ourselves internally and mentally. Got to
Mm-hmm.
unlearn that. It all starts in the home. And not only that, but our social environment and what we're around and how we are raised. So, say that there are some of us who are raised well off in those upscale, high, median income communities. And you see the low income communities and how they're raised and what's around. Our tools are different. Our education system is different. Our books are different. Our
That's right.
transportation is different because those mindsets are different. Whether if I would have chose to follow how my parents were raised and how their parents were raised, I would probably still be in that low income environment and in this mindset of, well, I'm like this, so my mind's like this, so I got to think like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I choose to go the other route, I can unlearn that stuff, get away from that environment, and try to thrive. But neither one is easy. But
Right.
it's all based off the battlefield of the mind and how we choose not just to live, but how we beat ourselves up for having certain ways that we think. Like
Right.
we have to teach ourselves like it's okay not to be okay, it's okay not to have it together, and it's okay that we went through this stuff, but we can't bear that. We are at a certain age, we have to hold ourselves accountable to unlearn certain things to grow. But I mean,
Yes, I love that. So there's a quote that I love, 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 and it's Harriet Tubman says, "I free you," and you probably noticed, "I freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed 1,000 more if they only knew they were slaves." Right. So talking about unlearning, what we have to recognize is that we are all unlearning. I think that some people think they're exempt, like I think
when
some
you get
people.
past a certain age, you don't want to unlearn no more because it's worked for you for so long. You get stuck
Yeah.
like, well, it worked this long. Why do I have to do it? Well, because it's wrong. And
Well,
you
the
know,
question is, but the question is, does it really work? Like, how is it working for you specifically? Like, if you really ask a person who says, well, it's worked for me for so long, how's it really working for you? Like, what are the limitations that come up that say that, in what ways is this working, but what ways is it holding you back? So is it really working if it's holding you back?
you
Right.
gotta
And
look at the
why?
time period then, because
Ex-
then it's not even about what's held, it's about what society has held them back. So they thought it's just okay to be that way, and they just
right.
get stuck. Well, it's worked so long because of this. We're not in that timeline no more.
Hmm.
Come to the real world
Yes,
now.
yes, yes. And so it's an interesting thing because, when we start to step outside of that our mind to
Hmm.
expand, or I mean, even some people are like, well, I don't know what I don't know. Well, if acknowledging that there is stuff that you don't know, you begin to investigate,
Yeah.
right? Well, what if there was not a stigma around? What if I could let go of the stigma around mental health? What if it was okay?
Hmm. There you go. Okay, I think your mic went off. It did again.
All right, it's unmuted.
Uh-uh. Look, that's the devil working right there.
I know, right? Looks like we're good. Let's keep things still now. All right. So I was brought up, um, in a household that sort of shoved mental health problems under the rug, and I'm very clear that it was because my my parents were also brought up. And I was actually having a conversation some time ago with my auntie who was sharing how this like dealing with mental health and talking about emotional intelligence and all of that. Talking about emotions in general was like a new thing that she was getting
It
used to,
is.
right? And then I was talking to my mom about it just last night, and talking about how, well, in her generation it was survival, right? So, of course, the mental health stuff gets
Toss out the window.
tossed out the window. Back in the day, I know you probably noticed it, back in the day, um, when slaves would run away and be caught, they would be diagnosed with this condition called drapetomania, right? Yeah. See, this is why Black people don't trust the system. And when I learned that, I was just like, I mean, it like baffled me. So it's a psychiatric condition to want to run away from being enslaved. Like, what? You know?
Precisely. Like, I gave all this to you. Why do you want to leave? You have nothing to worry about. You have to worry about bills and stuff out there. But you
Yes.
look at that, it ties into this stuff now in welfare. I'm giving you all of this. Why would you want to let go of this? This is free food stamps, free medical stuff, free help with housing. Why would you want to get rid of all this?
So the denial of one's own, like, mental unwellness is really
Mm-hmm.
a trauma response,
Yes.
right? And so when we start to learn this, then we can begin to look for, and this is the thing, I think the part that's important, because we can begin to seek out mental health professionals that look like us. So this is the thing. This is the thing. I'm hearing more and more, I'm seeing more and more, especially young Black female, young Black male mental health professionals, and it just, like, it's right here in my heart, because we need, and there's still a huge disparity. There's still a need for more. But when we really start to understand, I mean, we lost Twitch. I think the first day that we talked was the day that we found out that
Yeah.
Stephen Twitch Boss took his life. That was like the biggest shock. And that was, the impetus of our conversation, right? And there's just been so many more um, suicides since then. But I think that when we stop thinking that we have to suffer in silence,
Mm.
and then we can start to look for help. And when we start to look for help, we can find that there are people who look like us, who can help us heal, right? To help us unlearn.
Yes.
But we have to be willing to unlearn.
That's the key right there. I can't do the work for you. I can give you all the tools in America, do hypnosis, whatever it is. But if you truly don't want to unlearn, you are wasting our time and yours.
Right. And I think part of the fear of unlearning is the is not knowing what's on the other side. Because when you identify with this person, this survival for so long, this person who is a survivor for so long, you don't even know what's going to happen when you let that part of yourself go. You don't even know, it's like you won't even know who you are.
Not
And
only that, but you have to start holding people accountable. Then you got to blame your parents, blame your grandparents, blame your friends, blame your grandma. And then that's where the denial comes in. I did the best I could to give you what I
mhm,
had and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just telling you what I learned and what I went through. I just want to get it off my chest. And then you get afraid to open up even more then, and then that stops your healing. It's like healing
right,
means holding someone accountable. No one wants to get held accountable.
right, right, exactly, exactly. And I think there's a underlying shame
Mm-hmm.
in holding, because we collapse accountability with blame.
Yeah.
We collapse responsibility with blame. And blame is such a, it's such a disempowering place to be, right? But when you reframe accountability as, okay, now I can be at the source of this, because if I can take responsibility for it, that means I can take responsibility for what comes next.
Precisely.
Yeah, man. Whew. so so connecting, so it's interesting because we started our conversation with what you do inside of the system, and the and managing and healing the incarcerated mind inside of the system. And it's really kind of come out to, well, the incarcerated mind started way before the incarceration itself.
Exactly.
And there are people who are uh, unincarcerated, that are not incarcerated physically,
Quickly.
who are incarcerated mentally, you know, and in order to begin to free that aspect, then we need to be willing to acknowledge there are things that we need to unlearn and be accountable for our own healing. And what that looks like is reaching out and connecting with a professional that can help you. We can't do it alone. That's the other thing. We are really good at trying to do stuff by ourselves, are we not?
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. For
Same.
sure. I'm very guilty of it. But luckily, I've created what we call a village. So I
Yes.
have my villagers, and we have a group chat. And if I'm feeling up, down, sideways, or to the lowest, I instantly.
Yes. And I think us people who are in the mental healing mindset arena, we tend to be the worst. It's like, oh, we should know this stuff. Because I
We
definitely have been
should.
guilty, and took on therapy myself, because we take on other people's traumas
Yes.
all day, every day. Like, we're seeing it. We're indirectly, vicariously living trauma. And there may be even the personal traumas that we're experiencing that nobody knows about, that we're dealing with our own personal life, right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, for me personally, I was, had been being impacted since the pandemic began. And I had been saying, I'm going to take on a therapist. I'm going to take on a therapist. I'm going to take on a therapist. And 2 years went by. Yes. And finally, something happened in my community, and I said, okay, I have to do this. And it's just been, and then I intentionally look for a Black female therapist,
Mhm.
right? And then, I've just, as I've talked to my family members, as I've talked to people in the community, I always encourage, find a therapist that looks like you. Yeah. And just be accountable to unlearning, you know, and knowing that whatever comes out on the other side is for your highest good.
Yeah, that's the probably the hardest part for us to recognize. Like, okay, we're acknowledging this trauma, but it's not bad, and we shouldn't see it as such. It's like the trauma flooding and reliving it. Yes, that's probably like the worst part of any type of memory. But acknowledging, like, hey, it's gonna get better after
Mhm.
I get this out of my system. Then I can heal. And like that's what I try to do. Because naturally while they're incarcerated, they don't always have the funds to call home.
Mhm.
Sometimes have stamps. Stamps price are going up on the inside. So
Mhm.
I give them the first thing I give them when they walk through my doors is a notepad and a pen.
Mhm.
And I let them write it out. And I let them write letters to their little selves, to their adult selves, a time
Mhm.
when they're shameful, a time to their future self, and a
Mhm.
letter to their abuser. And that's
Mm.
always the little one, and the abuser are always the toughest letters because they have to, and it never fails. We always cry on those days.
Mhm.
Um, we they on their own they apologize to their younger selves because now they were able to pinpoint where most of them where their addiction started when they
Mhm.
got on the
Mhm.
other side of the law, and they said, I apologize to my little such and such, I
Mhm.
should have protected you. No, and they'll cross, and they always cross it and said, no, mom and dad should have protected you,
Oh,
grandma should have
wow.
protected you,
Yeah.
you didn't deserve this, blah blah blah. And then they speak to their future selves like, we're gonna do this and this and this, and it never fails. They do. Every woman I can say that I've had thus far, I've had a total of 60 women so far. um about half that group have been approved for parole, have shown that
Mm.
cognitive change. I've helped them get
Mm.
into halfway houses. I'm getting them with hooked up with Suboxone clinics if they're still on the road to recovery, and I give
Mm-hmm.
them a list of vetted therapists that I trust in their area that they need to see immediately once they leave. So
Wow.
I know for sure like what I'm doing is working. And even
Mm-hmm.
if they get put off on parole, it hasn't been more than 6 months. They go back and
Right.
they still show more growth. They haven't had any disciplinary write-ups after
Right.
they're done with me, and they still come bug me. I have an open door policy, so I know for a fact if on the inside of the worst are learning to undo what they've been taught for so long and thoroughly wanting to make a change and wanting to be drug free and wanting to leave prison and make an impact and get their kids back and be back
Mm-hmm.
with their families, then damn it, we could definitely do it on the outside. We just got to stop being so stubborn, stop being
Yes.
so social media driven, living up to somebody
Yes.
else's expectations, and sit and just say, all right, something's wrong with me. Let's figure it out. And like you said, seeing someone um, of color, and definitely in your price range because we can get a little pricey, is the best thing. I have two Black women therapists, and I have
Mm-hmm.
one not of color, but she's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But my two Black women, one's from Memphis
Mm-hmm.
and the other one's from Nashville, and they definitely put me in my place consistently. And I
Yes.
see them on a back-to-back basis. One's for a professional side, one's for a personal side, and I
Mm-hmm.
have not felt more whole before until like I
Mm-hmm.
had them both. Like one was like, okay, cool, I'm getting there, but I had both to hear me professionally and personal wise. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love it.
they're God given for sure.
I love it. Well, I think that, like I said, this is a multiple episode conversation because
Yeah.
we've touched on like the generational, but we hadn't touched on like the school part. And I really do think we should talk about that at some
Mm-hmm.
point. So, like, we need to maybe schedule another session down the road.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and talk about the impact of education and
Cool.
this whole school to prison pipeline. Because I think that there's a lot of work that's beginning to be done in terms of equity in schools and
Mm-hmm.
inclusion and diversity. I think that's very important, and also family engagement. I mean, I think that's a whole nother generational conversation that contributes, that the lack thereof, because of the inability of some, not all, but some schools to know how to engage parents in a way that uh, insert certain parents in a way that works.
There we go. Certain parents, and talk to them with respect, because as soon as a parent feels that they're talked down on, because in
Mm-hmm.
most cases, our children are hitting those educational points we can't. They're smarter than us. They're exploring more. They have a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more resources. So some parents may feel, less than, and they can't fully engage. And then the school kind of hits down on them more if they're not engaged. So I
Mm-hmm.
think teachers, wherever they are, especially in those communities, need to realize like, let's not fault the parent, but let's work with them. But then they think, oh, that's an extra step too much. I don't get paid enough for that. Well, you're with my child. I expect you to communicate with me like you want me to communicate with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
got to bridge that gap of respect as well.
And also logistically making these things that for parents who do want to engage accessible, because if you have a program at 5 p.m. and most people get off at 5 p.m., then not
Exactly.
people are going to be able to make it. But if you have a program that's
Mhm.
more like 7 p.m., then
Or
you
virtual.
know
I can tune in while I'm
yep,
driving, which is
or
what
virtual. It's
my
right.
girls will offer. Hey, virtual PTO meeting, what's going on?
That's right, right,
That's the
exactly.
best.
Virtual workshops for parents,
Yeah.
things of that nature. So I think that when we start to look at, even from that standpoint, making the engagement or the community meetings or things like that more accessible, giving partnering with parents instead of talking at parents, then we start to get a little bit more engagement, and then and then word of mouth happens.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's a whole conversation. That's a whole conversation. So I want
Cool.
to ask, um, if people are wanting to work with you, if they want you to bring you to speak. Yeah, I'm sure that
Yes.
you've done some speaking. They want to
I
hire,
have.
yes,
Oh my
hire you to
gosh.
speak. They want to have you do guest lectures, guest professorships, whatever there is out there. They want to work with you directly. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me 3 ways. through the Instagram page, the Relatable Counselor, through my email, which is on there if you click email, but I'll say it is mandieeman@yahoo.com. I
Mhm.
check that like every 30 minutes. um, and then the website, www.wellwhhw.com. So what had happened was.com. You can press that contact page. You can press the chat box and it comes to my phone and I respond to you. Those are the three quickest ways to catch my attention,
Mhm.
by far.
Very cool. And we will have all of that information in the chat. I mean, in the chat, in the show notes, in the show notes, so that people can reach out to you when they hear your episode with me. And so I want, I want to just thank you. Number one, for being here, for having this conversation. I love this conversation. It was an amazing conversation. Number two, for being so patient with me, because I know that we had scheduled this a few times, and so just for being flexible and being patient. And I definitely look forward to. Oh, thank you, Dr. Fantastic. um, I, I,
Thank you. I just
yeah,
looked at the phone finally.
yes. We have a great
We have
talk.
a lot more.
Yes. And I just appreciate what you're doing for people in the system and how you're empowering. I think it's so powerful what you said. Like you have an open door policy. Your clients come and bug you when they
Yes.
they show that they co-up for parole. I'm not stepping over that because that really got me. They come up for parole, they show the cognitive improvement, they get out, they get set up, they continue therapy, and you're hearing about the difference that this is making. And it just really goes to show that rehabilitation can work when we have therapists like you and we have people like you in the system who care, who don't subscribe to the automatic listening of they're just
Yeah.
XYZ. And so I want to thank you for what you do inside the system because you are amazing, my sister. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I love it. I get bored when I'm not at work. I miss my ladies. I mean, I've worked with the men, so I
Mhm.
get to go back there occasionally, but definitely the ladies for sure. Because I think it's important to remind people in that situation, like you are human, you are mothers, you are daughters, you are
Right.
sisters, you are friends.
Mhm.
I do have grandmothers. I think the oldest person I worked with was 72.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yes.
um, it, when you're in a system like that for so long, your pronouns are taken away from you. You need to get them
Mhm.
back. You need to get your power back. So I
Mm.
thoroughly make sure like you get some type of power back while everything away.
That's
Everything that's
right.
taken away from you.
That's right. That's right. Well, I want to thank, of course, also the people who are listening, because without the listeners, there's no podcast, whether you're listening live or whether you're listening on the replay. And what I ask you to do is share this episode. Share this episode so that people know what's going on. And with Mandii, like the work that she's doing, we'll have the article, The Incarcerated Mind. Share this episode to someone who would be empowered by this, who this would make a difference for. And leave a little review and let us know how you like this episode and what it is specifically what you are taking away from it, how this is empowering you. Because like I said, there's no podcast. We can't make a difference if we're not really spreading this message out to others. So as you know, and as always, I'm committed to seeing you all empowered, because for me, it's you who are the bridge to the next generation of empowered and resilient leaders. You all are the bridge to a new future. So with that, thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next episode. Namaste, y'all.